Welcome back to another Friday Functions video. This is actually a part 2 from the last Friday Functions video I showed you. And just to catch you up on what I did before is I had made a brand new custom form for keeping track of my Christmas gift giving. And in the list I based this on a SharePoint list, and in the list I have like the person's first name, what they're wishing for, whether or not I bought it or they received it, and then a link to Amazon where I could order it. So if you remember, I'm going to click on this and look at the custom form here. What we did was I made a custom form that I could use to record all this. So let's go back and look at that form in the canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and click customize. And just to remind you of how I built this form. And then what this Friday Functions video is going to talk about is it's going to talk about the patch function. I used it in this app for a particular reason, and I want to show you how I did that. I will also show you how I did it in a regular app. So this is a custom form app, but I also did it in a regular app, and I'll show you why. But the syntax for patch doesn't change based on whether you're using a form or an app. It's just I want to let you know why you might want to do these things in a form and in an app. So I'm just going to let this load, and we'll see our custom form that I showed you the last time. Basically, what this form does, I can just run it in preview mode, is it captures a couple things. The key thing that it does is enable me to enter and edit items that I plan to buy. And you can see that on the bottom section here where it says first name, wish, and Amazon link. And so at the last video, what I was showing you is that if the bike is not filled out, if both the first name and the wish are not filled out, notice that basket on the bottom, which is going to save the item. It's dark right now, but if it doesn't have one of those two items, first name or wish, then it won't let you submit this item. So it's kind of doing um, a pre-submission check to make sure the fields are filled out before it allows you to submit to SharePoint. So if you're interested in how I did that, look at the last Friday Functions video. This Friday Functions video is going to talk more about what's happening up here. So up here on top of the form, I actually added a gallery where I include all the items in the list. And I suggested that if this was a real business scenario, I would probably filter the gallery by the items that I entered. So the filter would include the author equaling the current user. But in this case, I actually let it show all the items in the list. And the reason is because I wanted to be able to, while I'm filling out my form or editing my form, if I remember that I've already bought something, or I want to go check on the cost of an item, I can go and do that even though I'm in an item form. I can go and make edits to the items that are also in the list, not just this item that the form is based on. And so that's an option you have. So even though when you customize a form, the experience that is by design is that you're editing or adding or viewing a list item. But that does not prevent you from adding a gallery that shows all the items in the list, not just the current SharePoint integration item. So with that said, all I did was just insert a gallery on top of my form. So you can see there's a gallery called existing wish list items. And its items property is the giving list. And since that list is already included in your app when you customize a form, you'll have that data accessible to you. Now, on a second point, just before I go into patching, you could always add a different list in here by adding a data source and then putting a gallery of a different list. Now, why would that be interesting? Let's suppose this was a change order form, and you're filling out change orders for next month change order review. At the top, you could have a gallery of the previously approved change orders filtered by the name of the contractor, for instance. So you can take your forms, focus on the items as far as edit, view, and new, but include galleries that have related information and enable the user to act on those as well. To that point, this is where the patch statement came in. What I wanted to do was to be able to edit these other list items from this form. So what I did was I added these two icons, and it's the first one that really matters. You see that here it's gray. On this first item for Kelly, it's gray. On this item, it's dark blue with a check mark. Now, what that means is when the check mark is visible, it means the item has already been bought, right? So in the form, this would be shown by this toggle switch, which is a yes no situation. If I turn it to yes, it's been bought. Um, but if it's not yes, then it hasn't been bought. So in the case of Thomas here, that that little icon is gray. Sorry, I just clicked it. I didn't mean to click it. But by clicking it, what I did was I sent a patch statement into the list and actually set Thomas's corkscrew as bought, even though originally it was not bought. And I wanted to tell you, how did I do that patch statement? Now, that accidental click is the reason why, if this was a real business scenario, I would interject a dialog box, which means that I would look at Veronica's blog that she did last week, and I can put a link to that in the description as well, where she shows how to do a dialog box. And when I click that icon or tap that icon if I'm on the phone, it would pop up a dialog. Are you sure you want to mark this corkscrew as purchased? And then if they accidentally clicked it, they could click no and nothing would happen. But if they meant to click it, they could click yes, and then the select statement that I have now would execute. So by interjecting a dialog box, I prevent accidents from happening, which I just proved can happen. I did not mean to click that. I just meant to select it. And of course, because I was not in the template, that's why I didn't select it, right? So you always select in a gallery in edit mode, you select from the template. And that's why I made that accident, is because I clicked over here. Now I do want to show you that this particular icon, the way it looks, comes from the fact that I have two images. I have a dark one and a gray one in my media, and I actually tell this image if the item is received, which means that in the list, if it's marked received, which is the same thing for bought in this case, if that's true, then use the bot image, otherwise use the bot gray image. So that's how I manage what color it is. So if we view media, you'll see that I have a gray and a not gray for every single icon, which means that I can put logic on it to say whether it's, gray or not gray. But more important than that is the patch statement that I'm using on select. And this is when you click on it, how it's updating that item in the list, even though it's not the item of this form. So it's a simple patch statement right here. And all it's saying is update the given list. Which item in the given list? Since this is a modification, I have to say what record. Well, this item right here in the gallery. And then I'm sending to the title, whatever the title was already, and I'm marking the received as true. And you can separate these rows to make this a little bit easier to read, because basically you have this syntax right here. Let's look at this syntax really up close. So I'm going to open up PowerPoint and you'll see this is my giving custom form, and this is the patch statement under that icon. Notice that the patch statement starts right here and ends over here. And then for every record, we have um, a field name and a colon. So if I do this like I did it in PowerApps, you can see this better. There are squigglies around all of the fields. So you've got an open squiggly and a closed squiggly around all of the fields, and then you have the close paren for the function. But what's important to remember when you're patching is that what is in front of this colon right here is the internal name of the field. So the internal name of the field is not the name that somebody might have edited that column to say. It is the internal name of the field. So how can you find out what the internal name of is a field on SharePoint is a little tip you might want to know. So if I go into the giving list, right, it is possible that I can go into list settings and I can change the names of these columns. However, the first time you create your column names, that name is what's going to be the internal name. Now, you can not know what was used the first time. You don't maybe you don't know, or maybe you didn't create the column. You can always find out what this column's internal name is. Now, notice that says first name. That's the display name. If I go up here to my ribbon, you'll notice at the very end of the URL, because I'm in the column settings, you'll see it says field equals title, and I hope you can see that. So when you patch, you must use the internal name. The display name will not work, okay? So just remember that. That's the biggest tip that I find. If once you know that, life is good. Now, if you try to patch and you have not used the right field names, it will return a syntax error and tell you that that field does not exist. Let's see if we can provoke that error together in PowerApps. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to very carefully select this field, and then I'm just going to replace title with, let's put first name or something. Let's just try putting first name. Okay. Well, let's just put whatever my fingers want to type here. All right. Now, notice that as soon as I did that, it all went squiggly red. And notice that there's a little error message here that says the specified column first name does not exist, right? So you must use the internal name. And if that happens, you need to go back to SharePoint and find out what your internal name is. Now, another way you can find out what the internal name is from within the app is if you go to data sources. I'm sorry, if you open up your form. So in this case, I'm using the same list. You open up your form and you go into the properties of this um, panel here. I can go into advanced options of this field, and you'll notice that it shows me the internal name, which is called the data field, the display name, which is first name, and whether or not it's required. I can see that right away. So I can see it in the advanced options of the app, or I can use SharePoint to find out what that internal name is. But I always want to use the data field or the internal name, not the display name when I'm patching. Okay, that's a very important point. The other important point is irrelevant to whether it's required, I always patch the title field because the title field is important in a lot of ways in SharePoint. So I will go ahead and patch that as a default, whether it's required or not. So if we look at this up close, we basically have a patch function. It starts with what the source is, which is the giving list. If it's a modification, then we have to say which item am I modifying. In this case, I'm within a gallery, so I can just simply say this item. And then I can specify what the columns I want to patch will contain. So my title, I want it to be this item's title, and the received, which is the important part of this particular scenario, I will be marking true, which will mean now the item is marked bought. Now I want to show you the syntax of this from our documentation. You'll see there's basically two. So in the top one here, you can see the table they're referring to, and I will give you the link to this document as well. You'll see that when you're modifying, the important thing is to specify what the criteria is for modification. Whether you're looking at the ID number or you're looking at the first item where the flavor is chocolate, like in this case, and then you put in your patch statement or what column you want to update so that it knows which one, okay? And then in the second syntax example here, this is when you're submitting a brand new item. So in that case, you always use defaults and the list name that you're updating for a brand new item. And I'll show you when I did that. So I'm going to take you back to PowerApps and I'm going to show you another app. This is another app that I've done that I've already talked to you about, and I think I've blogged about this app. But it has no submit form. So nobody could have clicked submit form because there is no form on this screen. There's just these three icons that you use to set the humidity or to set the temperature. You use these three icons. So there's nothing on here to go submit form. So this had to be patched, right? And what I'm patching here is the humidity and the temperature reading for this date. So if I submit that, and I'll just go ahead and press this with my mouse because my finger is not working, you'll see that the list itself, and I might not have that page set up, but the list itself is now updated with those two items. And here is the patch statement for that one. Now, in this case, this is a brand new item, so we're not editing something. We're actually logging the temperature and humidity for that date in that plant room, right? So it's an internal plant room. So in this case, I needed the name of the source, which was temp humid list in SharePoint. And then I just needed to say defaults temp humid because it's a brand new item. But then everything else is the same. I need to prefix each column that I want to change. And then right after that colon, actually say what I want that change to be. Now notice that for the humidity, right? um, I made sure that that number would be read as a number. So I actually sent the value of a text field in order to get these numbers back. So be careful that you match your data types as you're submitting data back to SharePoint. Notice that the period, though, I chose to use now, which works just fine in updating dates on SharePoint. So basically, that's how these patch statements work. Another important thing to recognize when it comes to patching is that if you're patching a complex field, which is a field that has more than one value, in fact. So, for instance, a people field, it has several values, like an ID number for the user. It has a username. It has a email address. It has all these different values. It's not just one value. Same thing with choice lists, that there's an index number and a display value for the choice that they've taken. Those complex fields cannot be patched as easily. And what I love is that Laura Rogers, and I have the link here and it will be in the description as well, has written a wonderful blog on how to patch to a complex field, such as a choice field or a people field. And so you can read her blog and work on that. Now, this is not the easiest thing to do, I will admit. And so we're working to make that idea easier over time. But in the meantime, I have to say, Laura did an excellent job of documenting a way to patch to a lookup field or to a complex field on SharePoint. So check that out. I hope you enjoyed this Friday Functions video and that you give patching a try. One of the main reasons I love patching is because it enables me to lay my controls out any way I want. I don't necessarily need a form control in order to send data to somewhere. I can patch to Excel, I can patch to SharePoint without having a form. And so it gives me a little bit of freedom in my design. You'll notice, especially with this particular app, the last thing I wanted was a form field. I wanted this to be extremely finger friendly and not a traditional form. And this is where your opportunities are to revolutionize how we handle mobile apps. It doesn't have to be a little box that you type into or a drop down that you select from. We can get very creative in how we design how the user inputs the data to make it easier for them and or faster for them. And then the patch function will help us to submit that data. So enjoy the experience. I look forward to our next Friday Functions video.